So I'm going to talk about spiritual bypass, and a lot of people haven't heard of the term spiritual bypass, and so I'm just going to define it a little bit first of all. So there's this thing that people talk about, which is the ego, right? And Freud defined ego, and it has a particular definition for him. And but nowadays people talk about the ego, and they don't really define what it is. So I'm just going to say for this that the ego is kind of a false self that gets created in order to be acceptable or loved, right? So it's a kind of a performing or like a performing self that isn't actually who you really are, like deep down. Okay, so let's say that's the ego. And then often what spirituality seems to be about, when people talk about spirituality, it's like this thing where you kind of, it's practices or ideas which lead you to be more authentic and less being in this kind of inauthentic false self, right? So you become more like your authentic, true, deeper, more meaningful self, okay? So spiritual bypass is where somebody is using spiritual concepts or approaches or language to create a false self. So it's like a spiritual false self. So you'll see these people who are really, really fake, who seem really fake and aren't really in contact with their authentic self, with their real, true, deep, meaningful self, and they're framing it in this spiritual language. So the thing is that the bypass happens all the time, right? So you get somebody who's driving their fancy car and got their fancy clothes and they've got their fancy handbag or whatever, and they're all about, yeah, I'm so special, I'm so cool, everybody wants what I've got, I'm really successful, I'm really like attractive, whatever it is. This is creating this false self, which is all about how I'm perceived by people externally for what I have or what I do, what my job is or whatever. So that happens all the time. People are always having these bypasses, and then eventually they realize that's not satisfying, and they dive deeper and they go into maybe they come to spirituality, but then it just becomes another way of avoiding actually being truly themselves and actually being connected with themselves deeply. So it's also connected to spiritual materialism, which is just like materialism, but spiritual materialism. It's like, oh, I've got, I do all these, I go to all these workshops, I have all this special language, it's kind of, there's a bit of an in-group, where you don't really know what I'm talking about when I, whatever, or, oh, you're, that person over there is a bodhisattva. What the fuck does that mean? It's all this language of special, like Sanskrit words or words in different languages to signal that I'm part of this in-group now, which again is just bolstering this false self. And so I get really pissed off about spiritual bypass, because I can sort of say, oh yeah, that person, they're obviously suffering. They pretend like they're happy, they pretend like they've got everything they want, but they're obviously suffering, and it's, I feel sorry for them. And I feel sorry for people who have spiritual bypass as well. But the thing about spiritual bypass is that it's this thing where it's supposed to be a way out. It's supposed to be like spiritual practice or spiritual stuff is supposed to be the way to a more meaningful existence, and yet it's being used in this kind of warped way to actually bind people even more deeply into being lost and stuck in a false self. And so you get people that they're leading people along this path, or people are following other people, like, wow, like they're so spiritual. It's like, what's so spiritual about them? They're like, well, they're just so normal. This guy's he's just like a normal guy. And it's like, yeah, it's because he's a normal guy. It's like, no, you don't get it. No, like he'll sit up there and he'll talk about stuff, and people ask him questions and he'll just answer them like you or I would, like absolutely normally. And it's like, it's because he's completely normal, So they're just so I don't even identify as spiritual anymore. I mean, I used to. I would have said that I was spiritual but not religious, but I'm not even spiritual. I'm just me. I try not to identify as much as possible with anything other than what's actually happening right now. That's what I'm trying to do, and often I don't succeed, and often I find myself getting lost in my full self. And have you got any questions? Anything that you think I could add to it?